Hi everyone, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can check them out at filmmakeru.com. Every week, we talk to a professional to chat and give you a chance to join us and ask questions. Today, I'm joined by Billy Hobson, digital intermediate colorist for Lady and the Tramp, Suicide Squad, and of course the TV show FBI, among so many other things. Hi, Billy. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you?
Pretty good, thanks. I guess my first question is, what's the difference between a colorist and a digital intermediate colorist?
I think as of today, there's really not quite a difference. I think the lines of specific colorist roles have been a bit blurred in the age of streaming and sort of the heightened sort of skill set of colorists working in all mediums today. The term DI, digital intermediate, came from a time where we were actually scanning film, and then you would work in it in a digital format and then go back out to film. So as of now, it's DI is sort of a loose term used for finish color grading. It sort of encompasses everything now. So the reality is it's mostly just about, however you want to label yourself, but we all kind of do the same thing at this point.
So, for your projects, how do you like to get on the same page as the director when you're starting a new project and making sure that you get their vision on screen?
Yeah, I mean, first we try to get in as early as possible in the process to sort of talk about what their vision is and what the feelings they want to express, with the color grading. There's many conversations had between sort of the director, the cinematographer, art direction, that sort of thing. They all kind of play into the tone of the film. So, there's just a lot of kind of back and forth. We do a lot of camera tests, lighting tests, and then any kind of like inspirational images that they might like, they'll share that with us to kind of put our headspace in the right area. And then, any films that they're particularly inspired by, we kind of look at those and generally get the kind of tone of the film, and then we kind of build upon it from there. And then it's sort of always it's always kind of evolving as the film goes along, because you think you might want to start it at one thing, and then depending on what's shot, etc., or you'll kind of go back and forth, and then ultimately you'll end up at the final grade, and it'll be its own unique thing.
Now, you worked on the original Suicide Squad. What I'm interested in is there was it at least from my perspective, it feels like there was each of the characters had their own color palette in a way. Is that how did you guys approach Suicide Squad?
Yeah, that was one of my first big films. I was actually the DI editor on that, and like a DI editor slash color assist. We we worked with Yvonne Lucas on that. He was the supervising colorist, and it was sort of a lot of that was art direction. So the costumes and that sort of thing kind of lends itself to that sort of uniqueness between the characters. And then we just kind of take that and emphasize it throughout the film to kind of, give it its own vibe. But it's very much, we sort of approach everything as like a scene by scene kind of thing. You kind of look at what's there, and then you go, okay, how can we draw your eye to this, or how can we make this character pop a little bit more? And we kind of build on it from there.
What are some of the tricks or techniques that you sort of discovered there that helps you guide the viewer's eyes or make something in particular pop?
Yeah, we use a lot of power windows, playing with color, that sort of thing. So you can sort of like, draw a shape around a character and brighten up the center of that and kind of let everything else fall off on the back. And you can do, any amount of different techniques with that. You can play with color, desaturation, and then making the characters' colors pop, or you can do it with density, kind of making everything darker in the background and kind of bringing the forefront. A little bit goes a long way there. just even a subtle change like that will help you just kind of focus in on a particular part of the scene, whether it's a character or an object or an action happening.
Now you're also, as I mentioned, you're working on the 2 FBI series. How does that working on a feature versus working on a television show differ for you?
Creatively, I approach everything the same. I always want to put my best work out there. I would say the number one thing is time. Both of those shows are hour-long shows, so you've got about 42 minutes running time, and you have 2 days to do it, basically. So it's and running time for me is a bit. It comes secondary to how many actual shots are in the show. So if it's super cutty, then it gets really difficult, because we can be anywhere in the area of 600 to 1200 shots per episode. So really, on a feature, you get sometimes, you get a week, sometimes you get 2 weeks, sometimes you have a month, maybe more, depending on, if it's a very visual effect heavy film. Typically, you're kind of like riding on the tails of visual effects, so you're always waiting for shots to be finalized, and so that can kind of drag out the process a little bit. But to do an hour and a half, 2 hour film, the typical is about 2 weeks. So TV is much more run and gun, and you're chasing that deadline. You have an air date, you better make that air date. So, and you kind of just have to play chess a little bit with all the other pieces, the sound mix and the effects and conform. It's a little bit more of a moving target.
How do you keep on top of everything then? If it's a moving target, like I think about, if an action scene comes up, which is, in an FBI film or show could easily happen, how do you keep on top of everything if VFX are going one way and you're going to conform and sort of trying to balance that out? Is there anything you've sort of learned or tricks that you've sort of used to keep on top of all that?
I mean, for me, the number one thing is communicating with my clients, understanding what is what and where it is in the process. Fortunately, for these 2 shows, it's when it comes to me, it's pretty much done. There might be some temp VFX in it. In fact, a lot of times there's a lot of temp VFX, but being in the 3rd season of one show and the 2nd in the other, I kind of already have a feeling of what's going to happen and how things are going to get delivered to me. So there's usually no gotchas. So I can pretty much rely on those 2 days that I have to get the sort of bulk of the work done, get the pass done. And then I know that I'll get stuff kind of streaming in as the days progress. And then once we kind of get to that, do or die point, I just kind of have to have it all in my head, like, all right, check this, check this, check this. And then we do a review. So, myself, I'm kind of watching it down for the 3rd or 4th time. And then the clients are also, all the little things that they have in the back of their head that I might not be aware of, they're kind of scanning for that stuff too as we review.
In a show like FBI, because you've got the show going and like you said, you've got one for 3 seasons and one for 2. Have you guys created looks or presets that you're able to help speed up your workflow, or is it, because each time they're shooting, it might be a different location or something like that. It has to be sort of a fresh take.
Yeah, it's there's a sort of general look of the show. It's a very cinematic looking show. But I don't try to approach things as a, very looky type, show. It's still a very natural show. It's on the cooler end. So I just kind of approach each scene as its own. So I'm never trying to take a warmer scene and make it super cool, because then you kind of get into this area of like, the shadows start looking really contaminated with color. And I really try to respect what the cinematographer shot. So, I push it in the direction, but I never let the look sort of define what I'm getting as sort of the raw negative. so I'll do little tricks and stuff here and there. I'll cool off shadows if it's a really warm scene, just trying to get real color separation and maintain consistency of the look of the show. You're never going to see like a super warm scene and a super cold scene. It's and then I try to tie everything together with like sort of the reoccurring areas in the show. It's like they have a jock room, it's their joint operations command center, so that kind of always looks the same. It does change slightly, like depending on the time of day and how they've lit it, but for the most part it's like you have an idea of what it needs to be, and then you just kind of let it sort of define itself as you work on it.
So now one of the things I like to ask cinematographers and DPs is, do you guys have a particular lookbook or particular like where do you go for inspiration, I guess you could say, for a project?
I love watching other people's work. I follow a lot of different cinematographers and colorists on Instagram. Like, I kind of keep a little a gallery of stuff that I see, photographers, artists, movies, other colorists, and I kind of look at what they did, and there's some stuff that just like, wow, it takes my breath away, and I kind of save that, for later as like, okay, I really dig this sort of tonality, I dig this color palette, and and then nature too, because there's no better colorist than nature, and living in Southern California, it's sometimes the color palettes out here, of a amazing spring sunset at the beach, you just get these sort of things, and you just try to remember it as best as you can. But that's sort of, I just try to find inspiration in whatever I possibly can.
You said you follow some cinematographers and particular colorists. Is there a particular colorist or cinematographer that you would recommend people check out, or what is it about their work?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few people out there that I really admire. Obviously my fellow Harbor colorists, I think all of them are absolutely top-notch talent. There's a couple guys in New York. Tom Poole is one of my favorites. I think he just does stellar work. Sophie Borup. There's a friend of mine who actually works in the Middle East, Fadi Malik. Like, he does incredible work. It's almost hard to name, just a few, but those are a lot of my top guys where I feel like every time I see their work, I'm just always inspired by it. It's just like, wow, like that looks so good every single time. It's just like, that looks so good.
What would you say was the toughest scene for you to color correct in your career, and what made it so tough?
I don't know if I can say one particular scene. I think darker stuff is always kind of harder to grade, just because of the nature of darkness. It's if you push it too much, it can really start to look fake. And but if you are gentle with it, if you can finesse it enough, you can make something really nice. But yeah, I don't know if I could say any particular scene would be challenging. I mean, action scenes are always tough. I find in my TV shows, those are the most challenging scenes to do, because they do shoot in New York, so the light is always changing. And sometimes you'll shoot across a couple days, and the light is just completely different. So that always presents a challenge too.
So how do you tackle that? Because again, the action scenes would be, as you were saying, multiple cuts or multiple shots. So how do you tackle the different daylights and different colors in such a short time?
It's it's just understanding your technique and your approach, and the experience of doing it. So anybody can make a decently shot thing look good, but the exact inverse is, you really have to understand what you're doing in order to match more difficult scenes. But it's sort of one of those things, is like, you can never be prepared for it. You just have to have a good understanding of your tool set and what to do. And, typically my approach is matching skin tones first. So, shot to shot, cut to cut, it's kind of always going back and comparing against what you've already tackled, and kind of maintaining a consistency in the sort of overall density and contrast, and then skin tones. And then everything else is kind of secondary. You can kind of, window things to bring it down. It's sort of at a certain point, you can only get so far, and then it sort of becomes, artistic license of does it bump you, as you play through the scene? If it doesn't, okay, then it's good. But as any artist, you could tinker forever and ever and ever and still not be done with a shot. At some point, you just have to go, okay, it's close. It's close.
Now, you worked on Lady and the Tramp. Now, what is involved in color correcting an animation? I feel like that would be coming to you already in the colors that the animators chose.
Yeah, and it absolutely does. That was sort of since it was a mix of real world and CGI, the only real thing CGI was the dogs. There is a lot of work that gets done there using mats and stuff, because VFX is working outside of the DI suite. So they're not seeing what you're color grading. They're working to a certain thing. And then when it gets into the DI, we've already kind of established these looks. So really it's utilizing mats and stuff that VFX has provided for you to just tweak things. You're not doing anything drastic, but you might tweak colors here and there, change contrast, that sort of thing, just to help with the continuity of a scene. Ultimately it's just like working as a colorist, you're another set of eyes on the quality of the product. So it's up to you to kind of be like, this isn't quite working, and you kind of take that information back to the VFX team in a collaborative way of like, oh, what if we try this? Like bring a little more texture into this, or the black levels need to be down a little bit more on sort of the deep shadows, in that case, in the fur of the dogs. But ultimately, yeah, there's some tweaking involved in it, but the approach is always the same.
Started as a digitally, working in the digital intermediate sort of area. Is there something you took from that area of your career that you sort of utilize now as a colorist?
Yeah, I mean, it's all kind of part of the same process, right? There is no real sort of separation of jobs at the finishing point. You're kind of dealing with a lot of things all throughout. I got my start in this sort of business as an engineer. So I have a very, broad understanding of the whole entire process. And I think sort of moving from engineer to DI editor to colorist, it was a great way to do it, because you see where all the shortcomings are, all the little tricks and stuff, editorially and system wise that help you as a colorist. When something goes wrong, you already have an idea of what is happening in the process, or like, you don't have to constantly bring people in and kick things back. You can kind of self-manage a little bit more. And you kind of, as a DI editor, you're kind of working closely with the colorist team. So that was a great sort of, lead up to me being a colorist, of like how to interact with that and how to sort of have an unspoken communication in timelines moving forward. So you're not just, ad nauseum talking, people forget things. So you building up those workflows of how to seamlessly kind of pass things along back and forth to each other. I think that was super invaluable for me to understand and learn. and just to see all the moving parts as a whole rather than just this, this little section of the job.
I have one last question for you. We're in this pandemic. We've been in it for a little over a year now. And everyone's sort of become, I guess, we've absorbed a lot of streaming media. Is there a show or a movie that you discovered during the pandemic that you think people should check out?
I have a nearly 7-year-old, so I haven't watched as much as much stuff as I should have.
What would they recommend?
Let's see, Wildcrats, YouTube, all the stuff kids like. I rarely get to watch anything fun, but I loved The Queen's Gambit. I thought that was an amazing show. It was shot so beautifully. The color grading was amazing on it. And then, I watched a movie I absolutely loved was Promising Young Woman. A friend of mine graded that, Katie Jordan, and the actual story of the film is amazing, and I just thought it looked fantastic. But yeah, I definitely have a huge backlog of stuff that I would like to watch and need to watch for sure.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.